Theme song. It's theme. Violence
solves everything.
Yes. Darkness.
Hello, darkness.
My old friend. I've come to bag-tag you again.
This time. Boom! Welcome to the only geriatric gaming podcast in the known universe, the Age of Gamers. I am one of your hosts. This is your other host,
Pfarcus.
And what are we talking about today?
Today we are going to go down memory lane, which is a lane that has memories.
It is a lane.
We want to talk about our earliest video game memories. It's going to be a little bit of an episode that ages us probably quite unflatteringly.
No, people like old people. We're wise.
We're wise. We've seen the ways.
It's like Miyagi. Nobody likes Daniel. They like Miyagi because he's wise and he knows everything.
It's true. It's true.
Daniel's annoying. Johnny's pretty cool.
Johnny's pretty
cool.
Cobra Kai.
Cobra Kai. And yeah, so that's our topic today. Memories. Old ones.
Yes. The oldest ones we can conjure.
Going back into the reservoir. So we might alienate some of our younger fans if you can't remember half the devices we mentioned. But you know what? It could be a little bit of a fun learning session. See where you could be. And so someday, some point, nobody's going to even know what a PS5 is. It's going to be like, what? You played on a PS5? You're an idiot.
Or obviously, the PS17 is the...
Yeah. Nobody. Yeah. So yeah, that's our topic today. So if you want to just drop us a like,
comment.
If you want to comment.
What your earliest memories are.
Tell us about that stuff, and you can subscribe to us if you want to hear a couple of old people talk about gaming experiences.
But if you do, remember to click the little bell.
Yeah, hit a bell. Get a ring-a-ding-ding every time we talk random at you. And on that note,
so my earliest memories, and if anybody watched The Angry Video Game Nerd, they will maybe have heard of this game.
How old were you when you first had a gaming experience? Like, at what age were you?
Well, I had a gaming experience before I owned a console. So when I was... must have been about 5 or 6 years old. So one of my earliest memories, I remember my cousin had an Atari, like the 2600, back in the day when you actually had to put a little cartridge in the top, and then you had the joystick. I remember there was a little rubber ring on the joystick that I used to take off and put my finger through because it made a popping sound when you pulled your finger out. And then I got my finger stuck in it because I kept on doing it so much that my knuckles swelled up. And then we had to cut the rubber thing off my hand, and we ruined my cousin's Atari controller.
So yeah, is that the controller? Was like
it had the
one button, the red button,
yeah,
and then the joystick. Yeah, that was like my first experience with it.
Yeah, that was
any kind of controller.
Yeah.
So back in the day, you can show a picture of this fine photos. It was just a controller, like literally, it was like a flight stick. It was closer to a flight stick than anything else. It was just joystick, and you directionally. It wasn't really that responsive. You were like, and the guy would go like 2 steps, and you'd be like, and he'd go like 1 more step, and yeah. Well,
that's what I was mentioning with the Angry Video Game Nerd. Is he brings a lot of attention to this game. There's a game that came out for the Atari 2600 that I do remember playing. And it's a little game called E.T. And it was the worst game. At the time, anyways, it was the worst game.
It might actually be in history.
It might be the worst game in history.
I think it's known as being. Like, if you watch any documentary, it is the game that destroyed video games.
It almost did.
For its time, man.
Yeah.
It almost destroyed the entire thing. Because it was the game that made everybody question whether or not it was a good thing. And literally most of, like, the Western society was like, no, this is evil. We don't want it.
Yeah.
This is dumb. We're not going to be in our society ever again.
So for those who don't know about the game, you play as E.T. You're a little pixelated E.T. You just randomly walked around. And to this day, I don't understand the logic.
And you walked around and your head popped up. So
yeah.
This little body of your head would and then you put your head down, and that was like the puzzle.
Yeah, and you'd randomly show up in a pit that was impossible to get out of. I don't know what those pits were. I don't know why I got stuck in them all the time, but you couldn't get out of them. And I remember as a kid being like, this is stupid. And then I just took apart the controller and started doing that thing, and then I broke my cousin's controller. Sorry.
Like, I will make a real game out of this game.
So yeah, that was one of my earliest memories.
My earliest memory. It would have been something similar in terms of like Atari, because I remember like Atari being one of the. Actually, no, it might even. I can't remember exactly which one came first. Like Atari, like there was Atari, but there was also like Commodore 64 and all that stuff, and I can't remember which.
I think the Commodore 64. I want to say.
I feel like it did, because we were pretty on the cusp of like all that stuff. Like Dad would always bring home, or at least had access to people that knew, or like friends had some of these systems or whatever. I kind of remember never having the Commodore 64. Like I didn't own one.
Nope.
But I had friends that had one. So I think it was kind of my first experience was, the discs and putting the discs in whatever.
Was it floppy or was it like the cassette things that were in
I think it was a floppy. And it was just like a keyboard, and it was closest thing to kind of more closer thing to a PC, but yeah, E.T. was an early one for me too, game-wise, because I remember the Crick getting it around Christmas. I think it was around a Christmas release. I think it was a commercial where it was like E.T. was sitting in front of a TV at Christmas time playing E.T. or something stupid.
E.T.ception.
Yeah, that's what he would do. And I remember that being a thing. And Atari was like, but people hadn't committed to video games as much back then. It was like more like really just a kind of a preoccupation.
It was a toy.
It was just a toy for all intents and purposes. It was like Pong and, all these really silly.
There's one that I never experienced it myself, but I watched a lot of like gaming history channels that talk about it. Like there's one that literally was just a color insert you put on your TV, and you would just play a little block that would go through this color insert that you put on your TV, and it's like that's kind of hard to take.
Yeah.
Seriously, but then people much smarter than us friggin' just built an empire on top of these sticks and
yeah,
mud.
There's a lot of iteration in our lifetime. Like we've seen things.
I even remember, it's kind of hard to think of it, but I remember the original Nintendo was kind of mind-blowing at the time.
It's very mind-blowing. I don't even know if justly so. I think it was more the fact that it wasn't anything we hadn't seen before, but it was like the most well-packaged thing. You know what I mean? It was like Nintendo took something that was kind of just free-form out there. People were throwing ideas. Atari came out. Atari died, and then everybody questioned it. And then Nintendo was like, here's this great, fantastic little package. We're going to put it back in everybody's mind. And, and they did. So that was kind of cool. Some of my earliest memories were actually built around Sega systems. For whatever reason, I know I mentioned on the channel before, but whatever reason, like my parents would always buy me Sega. Sega must have been cheaper or something.
I think it was.
So it's like, they were like probably trying to get a bargain deal. And then they'd bring it home and I'd play like a couple games, whatever games they get. And then I'd go over to my friend who always had a Nintendo. And I'd come back home and cry to my mom until I get a Nintendo. And then they'd take my Sega system, like pawn it off on one of my cousins or something. Yeah. And I'd be like, oh, okay, I'll buy you a Nintendo. And then that's kind of what always happened. I don't know why I was such a Nintendo fanboy, but I'll say it came from being a young age. I couldn't help it. Nintendo was in my blood.
I kind of had the opposite. My parents always bought me the first console I ever got was the NES, and I just fell in love with it. And then I think I was one of the few kids that had it in my class, and I remember we'd all like it kind of made me the popular kid just because I had the Nintendo. So they'd come for my birthday party and they would just be like, what game are you getting? And I didn't know at the time as a kid. I didn't realize it, but they were all basically saying, what can we mooch off of you with? And I actually, one of my earliest memories was a birthday party I had where we all played Jaws. I don't know if you remember that NES game. It was a really weird game. You played as the shark.
I vaguely do.
And you kind of had to go and run away from the fishermen and eat seashells. And
every game that was based on a property back then also never made any sense. Like they had very loose ties to there was like a pizza one. Remember the one that was like Domino's Pizza guy, or there was like maybe it wasn't Domino's Pizza, but
I remember there was cool Noid. Yeah, I remember the Noid
pizza game. Yeah. I had that. That was annoying. There was a Cool Spot game for but even the movie games, they were so loose with the IPs. It wasn't like today where they try to bring you into the world. It's like
I remember the original Batman on the NES. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, basically just for some reason there was little
that was a good
robots
game.
that would like follow you around, and you had to punch things. And some of the enemies didn't make any sense and never appeared.
It never made any sense, but it handled pretty well for a good little game. I remember that. I remember the Wayne's World game where you're just a giant head with a guitar.
That was for the Super Nintendo, wasn't it? Or did they
It's
have
one of them. I can't remember.
I think it was for the Super.
It was like ridiculous. Probably didn't Super Nintendo because it was the 90s thing.
Yeah.
I think. Wayne's World. But anyways, that game was ridiculous. All those games back then, it was funny. IP like related games. They were just literally some stupid arcade ripoff with like a skin over top of it to represent whatever they're trying to represent.
Actually, one of my favorites is, and I remember me and my sister would just stay up all night playing this, and it was insanely difficult. I don't know if you ever played the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, I love Ninja Turtles.
And talk about not making sense. There's one level where you go through a swamp with electric seaweed.
Yeah, the water level, the infamous water level.
To disable bombs. That never appeared, as far as I know, in any of the...
I don't think a Ninja Turtle ever swam anything other this game. But yeah, no, that game's actually kind of infamous in its own right. But yeah, another good game, Battletoads.
Oh yeah, Battletoads.
But that wasn't based on a property of any kind. But.
I remember being really much better at Battletoads than I am now, and maybe I can't see myself being more skilled at that game because that game is insane.
No, I remember being more skilled at a lot of games.
Mega Man was the same thing, yeah.
But in terms of early memories, I remember some of the early memories, oddly enough, were like kind of PC related. I mean, I had the Atari, and the Atari was a thing, but then like there was this kind of, I feel like there's like a Nintendo kind of, the whole period around Nintendo was also kind of mired with early PC gaming. Like for me, like it feels like I had both kind of on the go as a young child, because my parents were really into computers. They'd bring computers home, but like our first computer was literally a 46SX with no hard drive. It was literally just a monitor. It had like the chassis for like the middle, but like there was no hard drive. It was just literally a floppy drive. There was all this space for just a floppy drive that, you use a monitor on top of, and like you get your floppy games. It basically was like glorified Commodore 64 because it was just playing basic PC games at the time.
And for the youngins, the floppy drive is what you now know as the save icon in most word processors. The little...
Yeah.
Except that was actually, I remembered... by the time I got a computer, they were actually the hard little floppies that look like the save icon. But I do remember in my school, they had those big floppies that actually were floppy. Like you shake them, they go pop, 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 and they flop around. And hence the name floppy.
Early school had like, I don't know about your school growing up, but my school always had like a bit of a computer area.
We had a computer lab when I was
like, they'd have like some games that was very early computer games. I was always like interested in that stuff. Like I always hovered around wherever technology was.
I remember they had my school had this one really awesome battle chess thing where like whenever you make a move, the chess piece would be like a knight or whatever would have to get up and walk around, and whenever you took another piece, it would have to like punch it in the face.
Yeah, I remember that game too.
That was awesome.
That was a fun game. Yeah, a lot of games were just sort of evolutions of smaller ideas like that too,
like Pong
Pong and chess and checkers. And I remember there being a bunch of like board gamey type things and solitaire, and then you have your random assortment of platformers that would always just take on some random iteration.
Yeah,
but a lot of my early game memories, like there's a lot of built around like just getting small games, and like you hovered around these small games, and I don't ever remember really playing much of the PC stuff a lot other than like Worms. I was obsessed
I used to love that game.
Even from the earliest iteration of Worms, I was obsessed with like Astonishment and Wolfenstein. Those games kind of like yeah. And then there was like the Sierra games that I really liked.
I loved
the point and click story games and all that stuff.
I was huge into like because I did eventually get a PC. I got the Nintendo first, and then after a while, my family was never really tech savvy, or they never really were in love with tech, but they knew I was, so they eventually got. I remember my first computer was a Pentium 100, and it had like 100 megabytes, I think, for the hard drive, and it was like all you will ever need kind of thing. I do remember playing Doom. I remember playing the Sierra games. I used to. I
got a message on my phone that's 100 megabytes.
I played Myst when it first came out, and I fell in love with that game. I love the idea of like this virtual world that you were solving puzzles in. And I'm trying to remember.
Do you have any funny game stories like when you were a kid? Like just some weird thing that happened?
Like with a game, like
just some kind of a weird game story around video games and being like an early memory that maybe not necessarily about the game itself, but like you and like, do you have a like hot babysitter that came over and played?
That's just you're putting me on the spot for something very specific. I feel.
No, I'm trying to fish out a crazy story. I don't really have any. Think about it.
I do remember when my friends came over to play Jaws. I do remember that I got like we ended up. This has nothing to do with the video game. I just remember this, but I remember we played Jaws for an hour, and I remember for some reason I got it. I was like maybe 10, and I found this bottle of Flintstones chewable vitamins, and I just ate the entire thing because I thought they were candies.
They are kind of.
Whoa!
Nowadays,
I don't know if you've ever experienced what happens if you eat an entire jar of vitamins, but it's kind of.
Can you just die?
It's kind of it feels like you got shot up with speed. I remember I was like, just like running around. I'm like, why do I have so much energy?
Doesn't it like also like sit in your stomach weird?
I don't know. I don't remember having a sore stomach. I remember having like an energy level of 9,000 and spazzing out and then just napping right afterwards.
He was power level 9,000.
I do remember that. Yeah, no, I don't really have any specifically like crazy video game stories. I never really like, secretly found a code in a video game that took me to another world, like in The Last Starfighter or anything like that. I think there was a movie about that, or maybe I just made that up. Was there a movie called Last Starfighter, or did they just make that up? I think I just made that up.
Did you have like a lot of friends based around video games growing up?
Yeah, I do remember. There was a lot of camaraderie when Mortal Kombat first came out, because I had the Super Nintendo at the time, and they censored all the blood and stuff. And one of my friends did have the Genesis version, and he would go on and on about how like my version is the real version because it has.
Was that you?
Yeah, it has my belly.
Wow, that's all those vitamins themselves back up all these years later.
They just.
There's a monster that's making brewery. He didn't nurse it very well over university years either. He just sort of kept it going.
All that McDonald's wrapped around it.
Yeah, wrapped around the vitamin core. Slowly punching its way out.
Speaking of punching, so yeah, it's like a reverse Mortal Kombat. Anyways, so I do remember there was like this camaraderie, and I wasn't even really into Mortal Kombat as a kid. I was more into Street Fighter, which is kind of ironic because I suck at the game pretty bad now. But I remember my friends were like, Street Fighter's not the real deal. Mortal Kombat's the real deal because you can rip people's spines out.
Mortal Kombat do what Street Fighter don't.
Exactly. And I actually remember there was kind of like an edgelord time period in video games when I was a kid where there was Mortal Kombat, and then there was a game called Primal Rage where you had like dinosaurs fighting, and there was like a fatality where you could whiz on your opponent, but you had like acid whiz because apparently that's a thing where like
it's a weird fighter, man.
Yeah, I'm not even making that stuff up. That actually was a move in Primal Rage. You must have played that. You're the fighter guy.
Primal Rage, I played, but oddly enough, actually one early memory I do have about fighting games is one that I think I did speak about it before on the channel. But like, I had a teacher who used to run Street Fighter tournaments. Kind of he'd bring his Super Nintendo in, and they'd hook it up to a TV, and he'd have run tournaments at recess and at lunch and stuff. And I really dug that. I think it's like, it's a weird thing, but I think it like formed a lot of like my adult, when I quasi searched out / was found by my local FGC. It kind of instilled that I've always approached fighting games. I've always liked them. And I think it was a lot because of that, because I kind of seen like, it was kind of almost like an early, like I don't know, like tournament session, right? Like you got to see how like modern, like it would be so ridiculously old school compared to what people do now with the esports. But it was like, you could see what
it could become
from that. And you could see how like, maybe this was done for a lot of kids. And maybe that's where all this stuff came out. Like I know like the online community sort of probably birthed it more than anything when you're playing online. But
well, I do remember
something better about playing in person.
And I do remember that was much more of a thing when we were kids, was like actually getting together on the couch and playing like Street Fighter or Mario Kart or whatever.
Well, even for the 360 era, when it was starting to be online, or even the one before that was just Xbox, like I'd have friends over just to play like the new Tekken or the new.
This is for 40 years of macaroni and cheese.
It was always much more of a sit down and play with your friends kind of a thing, because that experience online was kind of rough because of the lag and input. You know, like there's so many frustrations with fighting games that if you're not having a complete one-to-one, it can get a little frustrating. Anybody who plays them knows. So yeah, that was kind of like my earliest fighting game kind of experience, I remember. And I remember like, what's weird about my childhood is I don't really, like I remember having a lot of friends that liked video games and stuff, but it was like everybody kind of did, but it was like quasi so. It was like nobody was like super hardcore, but we all like had different games and we'd all be like, you know, come over and play this game, come over and play that game. I remember my cousin had Zelda. That's where I was introduced to Zelda. I never owned a Zelda game until I was later in life. But like I played Zelda and learned to love Zelda and Secret of Mana from hanging out at their place so much. Because that's what they had.
I had a bad experience with Zelda. My first experience with Zelda. And I think I did mention this on the channel.
See my cool Zelda sword?
I actually mentioned it before on this channel for the super fans that know. But I remember when I played the first Zelda.
Say it to him.
Yuck! For those who are in the know, that was not Zelda, that was Link.
That was true.
We know.
But you have to answer to Link.
Yeah.
When you bitch talk. Smack talk is.
But I remember, like, in the game, like, it says more about me than the game. But in the game, like, you start off and you're standing next to this cave, and then there's the map of the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. And so I just started wandering the map. And I'm like, all these enemies were popping up that I couldn't do anything about. They would just kill me. And I'm like, what's going on? This game sucks. So for those who know, the little cave door, you just walk in and you get a sword and you can actually fight off everything. But I just skipped the cave completely and just went on my own.
Yeah. The game was Dark Souls inspired.
It was
the time of Dark Souls. I had a similar Dark Souls experience, but
I do remember the first game that I actually kind of took seriously though was the original Myst, because my computer lab at the time, I think it was in junior high, maybe high school, probably junior high though. The computer lab at the time had Myst as one of like the modules, and you had to. They did this. Keep in mind, this was before Google. This is before.
There's a before Google.
There was a before the Google.
I'm pretty sure Google's already erasing this video just based on it.
It's already bots are like hunting it out. It's like, there was no time before Google. But yeah, it was the time before Google. And it was a time before the internet really was a huge thing, and the whole module was about beating this puzzle game, like, and you had to beat it on your own. Like, you had to actually figure it out. And for anyone who played Myst, it was actually a really hard puzzle game. Like the puzzles were really obscure, really abstract, and you really had to think hard about, like, there would be like a piano where you had to play a certain song.
Yeah, my cousins were really into that.
Yeah, and so that was kind of the module, and you had to write your notes on how you figured out the puzzles or whatever. And
it was kind of very much an interactive story game.
Yeah, and I was really actually impressed by the story that was kind of hinted at. It was never really like, there's not really like a really like beginning, middle, and end action-packed movie kind of story, but there was always like little hints of what's going on in the world, like little pieces of paper that would tell parts of the story. And I always that's kind of the type of game that I still to this day like, is the idea of like worlds that you kind of puzzle together. And I think it's
little Timmy. Sorry, just noticed.
Timmy has a visitor.
It's little Timmy, everybody.
Timmy.
It's actually a very suitable and very fitting t-shirt.
Actually, it does fit. But anyways, now I got derailed. What was I saying again?
You like Myst?
Oh yes, I liked Myst. Just because it was the first game that actually kind of made me feel smart. It made me feel smart when I kind of solved these puzzles. It tricked me into thinking I was smart, and that's a trick that has disappointed many a school teacher afterwards. But yeah, I think that's really shaped. Like, those are the kind of games that I really like even to this day, are the games that kind of trick you into feeling like you're smart. Like like games like XCOM that really make you feel like you're strategizing really well.
Makes you hate yourself.
Does make you hate yourself.
Kill your best friend.
Yeah. Oh,
on purpose.
XCOM is brutal. But yeah, I digress often. But yeah, so I think that was kind of like the first time like I really got shaped into a specific kind of game. Because before then it was really like, this game looks pretty. This game has lots of flashing lights. This game has Batman punching a spider drone for some reason.
All the games back then were pretty much the same. Like there were some variation of arcade experience until like the computer graphics sort of. A computer always seemed to lead the charge a little bit back then.
Yeah.
Like,
for sure.
Doom was pretty advanced for its time, right? And then consoles would come and catch up, obviously, and overtake because they were so accessible. Like, and everybody had a Nintendo at some point, right?
Yeah.
And then everybody had a Super Nintendo, and then everybody had whatever, afterwards, whatever iteration. And there's a lot of Sega kids out there. I know I'm not really putting my hat in with the Sega kids because I always tossed.
You abandoned them.
But I did play quite a few Sega games, obviously, because of it. But I just
actually, there's one game.
Something about their IPs, man.
I was always jealous because my friends actually got a chance to play. My friends with the Genesis got a chance to play, but I never did. And it actually looked like a really cool game. Was the original Eternal Champions? It kind of was like an edgelord Mortal Kombat style game, but with Street Fighter style animations and stuff. So like they had super fatalities where you just boot some dude down the top of a cliff and he'd fall down and get sawed in half and blown up and all these kind of they look pretty cool. But I never got to play it. So
Killer Instinct was the best.
Killer Instinct was awesome, but I actually got to play that on the Super Nintendo.
SNES. Killer Instinct was my favorite fighter for a very, very long time.
I remember the original Killer Instinct actually came with a music CD, and it probably was dated very poorly by today's standards. But I actually was really pumped about getting like the music CD that would like actually play in your music player. And
like I could actually say Street Fighter to Killer Instinct to probably Tekken. That was like the gap of like popularity for me. It's like I really liked Street Fighter early, and I like KI was my favorite for a very long time, and then Tekken sort of like absorbed all my fighter interest in the early 90s.
I always sucked at Tekken so bad that I just never really got behind it. And that says more about me than the game. But
I always had like super, it was always super intense, that game, because there were so many options per character. So there's something about that challenge is like when you, I don't know, we've often discussed this, so I'm way more competitive than you are by nature, especially with that stuff. And so like, I really saw it as this opportunity to be like, try to get good at something and then
get good.
Then you feel awesome when you're just playing against your buddies that never play the game. You beat the snot out of them, and then you go online and get your ass kicked by a 12-year-old or something.
See, that's kind of, I think that's why I never really got much above a competitive edge with fighters. Because the way it usually worked with me is all my friends had much more ADHD than I did. I hate to say. So what happened?
They out Bluebird you.
They out Bluebird me.
Wow.
Bluebird?
Bluebird.
Oh, I think you said
squirrel for you. You use squirrel a lot. You're like, oh, squirrel.
Is it squirrel?
Yeah.
Anyways, so like I would get like reasonably well, like not really great, but reasonably well. And
you'd be the best masher.
I'd be the best button masher. I'd mash the buttons the best, and then I'd kind of conquer everybody. And then I'd get bored of the game because no one has actually given me much of a challenge, and then I would just kind of wander off to. Their Bluebird made me Bluebird Squirrel.
Yeah.
Is what I'm trying to say. That is a sentence.
That was pretty crazy. I usually had a friend like that was either reasonably obsessed with the same game as me, and so like we would kind of challenge each other. And a buddy of mine who was into Tekken, and we would get frustrated and play and mad at each other and play and get better. And then one of us would be slightly better for a while, and then maybe slightly better. But you're kind of like just pushing yourself. There was no FJC back in those days, right? Yeah. It was just. You like to play Tekken. You do one other guy that like to play Tekken, maybe you do two other guys, but you know.
It's sort of a makeshift version of it, yeah.
The N64 was a big system too, because I remember like there was a lot of things that came out of that, literally. But it also had like, I remember like, and this is an obvious one, GoldenEye was huge, man, when it came out. Like I had a lot of positive experiences built around that with just friends like shooting. And like you said, there was always that one person that would just camp and then like your corner and like, it was a good game for the day.
See, I went the PlayStation route, so I kind of bypassed the N64. It was the first time that I veered away from Nintendo. When
So
I
you
got
never
the
had
PlayStation.
Golden?
I never had Golden. I never had the N64 period.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah,
Because I do remember being at a friend's house and looking at the controller, which was like massive, and then had like a stick in the middle where it
was like a flight
confused
stick
me so
slash
hard.
controller. Slash, yeah, it was pretty
You like
intense.
it just kind of, and it kind of bugged me
And
because
then you got a rumble pack you put on the back of it.
make it even bigger.
It's even bigger.
But what always used to confuse me is like there's literally, as far as I know, no way to hold this controller where every finger is on a button already. You have to shift to
You hold it like that, and you got the trigger and the joystick thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything else is kind of weird.
Yeah. So it was a weird controller.
But it was meant to be like, it was a configuration hold, which was interesting. Like, so it'd be like, okay, I'm playing a flying game. Well, I hold it like that. And I have the trigger.
Yeah.
And then, now I'm playing a fighter, so I hold it like a real controller, and then you have this giant.
The logic of it just always.
As a one control thing, if you tried to hold it, and like,
There was no
every
generic
part of it,
setup.
it'd be like, no, it's like, okay, I guess I play this type of game, I hold it this way, and if I play that, and then, yeah, it was interesting though. You definitely couldn't. Well, everything Nintendo does is interesting. So
True. They're kind of the black sheep.
they definitely carve a path of interest that way, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Thankfully, more times it does.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had a lot of good positive early memories with the N64 because that was kind of when was the N64? I want to say like late 90s.
I'll put the date on.
So I was
here.
like, I feel like I was like mid high school or junior high to high school when that came out. And so like, it was kind of the point where you're growing up, but you still have friends that come over. And that's the thing that you do when you're not talking about girls or whatever.
For me, when I got the PlayStation 1, I was in high school. So you must have been at least.
You're in high school, so I would have been probably in high school, but like.
Maybe a grade
just
above me or whatever.
Yeah. I feel like it was 96.
That sounds about right.
Because I didn't go into university with it. I know that. Because that university was like...
For me, it was the PS2, yeah.
PS2. So that would have been like high school, I think, for these systems.
Yeah.
I think. Pretty sure. I feel like that was the age.
You know what makes me feel old is there's some people that have never played the PS1 or the PS2. That are probably watching
this whole conversation has done nothing but make me feel old. There's people that were born after you graduated that have played systems. Their first systems were like systems that you were like well into university.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That blows your mind sometimes. That is a freaking weird thing to think about sometimes. As you get older, folks, you don't really... Like, your mind doesn't go on just old now. It's just like you just continue being yourself. And then all of a sudden something hits you in the face and you're like old. Especially with gaming. Because gaming is like, you get to see every iteration. So you get to go, okay, I played this thing. And then, your nephew comes over and he's like, what the hell's that thing?
Yeah.
Or doesn't have any connection to it.
Well, I watched this review, and this will sound like it's a tangent, but it's actually coming back to the topic. But I watched this review of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and he brought up the reviewer brought up a good point. How a lot of people are saying, "Well, it's the same old, same old. There's nothing new in the game, and it's kind of boring because we've been there before in the Assassin's Creed universe." And then he's like, "You got to remember, some people this is their first Assassin's Creed game they've ever played," and that blew my mind when I heard it because I played at least 17,000 Assassin's Creed games. 1 trillion Assassin's Creed games.
Yeah.
To the point where, it's kind of just it's like your breakfast cereal. It's just kind of familiar. And so the idea of like this being somebody's first experience in that world.
I don't think criticizing a game based on it just being completely new or innovative is a valid thing to criticize anymore. It's like whether or not it does what it's trying to do good, I think is the valid criticism. Because like you said, for some people, it's the newest. It's like, just because I think there's been 1,000 Assassin's Creed and that's why I didn't buy Valhalla in the end.
Yeah.
Well, that's why. It's because I've seen it all before. There's not
doesn't
much.
mean somebody else
doesn't
has
mean
it.
somebody else has it. And it's probably a fantastic game. And if I ever wanted to kind of get that nostalgia vibe of going back into one, when I played the Ezio years, right? And that was, to me, that was like, and Black Flag, where those were like the pinnacle of that series. And but I haven't been able to get back into it since with the same fervor because it's just more of the same. And I don't really know how that series evolves.
It kind of just goes into different
it's just
time frames. That's pretty much all it
does.
does.
Different thing, yeah.
Which is not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing. But like you said, that's an interesting point on why things get reinvented. And in certain ways, I think. And like with shooters, it's just often the same thing. I don't buy into very many shooters anymore because I already played my favorite ones, right? Like Battlefield 3. I loved that game. I have so many good memories built around Battlefield 3.
Think of it. Both of us watched the creation of the first-person shooter.
Pretty much. We've seen like
Wolfenstein 3D and Doom. They were
I didn't get to jump in those games, folks. You literally just...
It didn't even have like different levels. Like there could be enemies higher up, but the way the game worked, it was an illusion. So if you shot and there was a dude on a shelf up here, you could literally just shoot straight and it would still hit that dude. You just had to point in that general direction because you couldn't aim up and down.
It was going to do a little bit of work for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of interesting things going on. I mean, some of my favorite memories actually as a kid, and I'll go back, peel it back a little bit. Probably one of my favorite memories of all time, and it's why I sunk back into it again, was playing Game Boy.
Oh, yeah.
Having the Game Boy was a big moment for me because I really liked... Everything's kind of tied to your parents, right? When you get it, it's like, okay, you're going to sit in front of the television. You only have a certain amount of time to be in front of the television before they tell you to go to bed. And you can never... Eventually, I think I ended up getting the systems in my bedroom anyway. Somewhere it's like, screw it, get out of here.
I never did. When I was a kid, anyways.
I'm pretty sure I had the Super Nintendo in my bedroom at one point, which was cool for me because it's like I could play games whenever I wanted to, right? But it still wasn't the same. I think the first system that was like was the original Game Boy, and I'll never forget Link's Awakening. Was huge for me. That's why it's one of my favorite Zelda games, is because of the memory of just being able to take a Zelda game, which I had loved the franchise by that time. I had played it enough with my cousins and I played it on my own. I had this is kind of, I think actually the first one I might have owned myself, because I think I played the other ones at my cousin's house or other friend's house. But I had Zelda Link Awakening as my own, and I had to take it up in my room when it was all nighttime and everybody was supposed to go to bed, and you kind of like you stowed away. And it reminded me, if I think of it abstractly, it reminded me of a little bit of Never-Ending Story. You know, like
because the book and
the book and he takes away to another world. That's what it felt very much like, and it was a huge game. And like when they recreated it for the Switch, it melted me internally. I was like, this is like Nintendo loves me. Like this is just for me. And I think a lot of people had that reaction, almost similar reaction, because I think the game did very well. And it was a fantastic recreation. It wasn't rewriting the book or anything, which is exactly why I wanted it.
Yeah.
Because it was like, I just played it. It was like, I hadn't played it in so many years at that point, and seeing it in all its glory. It was a beautiful game. It's fun. It was amazing. I was so happy. And that tickled my fancy because it went right to the nostalgia bone. Like it just burrowed right through me, that game.
I remember the original Game Boy. I had it pretty early on too. And I remember it ate through batteries like nobody's business.
Frick, yeah.
I'm pretty sure that system was developed with Duracell to sell batteries. I'm pretty sure there was a secret plot there. But I remember there's even this clunky little light that you could add to it. It didn't have
yes, I remember that. Yeah, it was like
it was like this little claw that went up and like lit the screen, because the screen didn't have much of a backlight at all.
It was just
so if you played it in the dark, you literally couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
But they had this thing that would like reach over and give a light, but the thing took batteries too. So the Game Boy took 4 AA batteries, and this thing took 4 AA batteries to light the Game Boy.
You had to live right by a battery plant.
He was just devoured these things. Yeah. But I remember playing after...
no lithium ion.
No, they didn't exist. Rechargeable was like
that was much later.
Yeah. I think rechargeable batteries were around then.
Probably not.
They were clunky. They were clunky. But for me, the game that I started with was the Metroid game they had on the Game Boy. That blew my mind. How much game was in my hands. Yes,
because that game was beefy.
It was huge.
A little, game in pocket, right? I remember being on a road trip. Family, I think we were going to my grandmother's when I got that game, and they picked it up.
Yeah.
Anyways, whenever I settled down to play the game, we were on a road trip to go into my grandmother's, and that game was the highlight of like the trip, because like anytime I had spare time that I wasn't visiting or doing something, I was playing that game, and it was amazing. You're right.
Actually, I think I won that game on like
Return of Samus was.
I think I won that game on a pop bottle top. If I remember right.
I've never won anything. I never won anything.
I think that was the only thing I've ever won.
Like literally, I don't think I have won anything. Not one time in my life have I won anything of substantial value. Like I won here's a free pop or something, but nothing like ever of substantial value.
Like a video game.
I've not won anything. And I put my name in a lot of things. I remember at work, there'd be like 3 people and 2 of them got an iPad. And I'm the 3rd person and I never got an iPad. I'm always that person. It's like, I never have any luck. We go and everybody gets a free book bag except for this one guy because he sat
that one guy.
That was me. Yeah. I never won anything. Fuck you for winning that.
It was either a pop bottle or like a Doritos bag or something. I might have been completely making this.
No, you're right. I remember there was things like that.
Yeah.
Like those types of contests on chip bags or something. But Samus, that was a good pick. Yeah, that was a really good game. Those were my 2 favorite games for Game Boy of all time. Obviously Tetris, I played a lot of that too, but everybody.
I still have that song stuck in my head. That little dun 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 dun. Anyway. They should totally make a heavy metal version of that. There probably is like 7 heavy metal covers.
There are probably. Yeah, we'll play it for you right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, a lot of good memories around that system for sure. Growing up, and what was interesting is like it wasn't until much later when they made like the color and they had Pokemon that there was like a multiplayer component because then it was all about Pokemon was really cool because like. I was still quite young when the original Pokemon came out. Yeah. So it was all about, you got your Pokemon game. Did you get the other color? And then you trade. And that was like that. First, it was almost like the first
co-op. Like a cable that you plug your game
you game boys together to transfer Pokemon and stuff. And that was a really cool thing. And I remember it being very, very much a positive memory. I remember I was a little bit older, but I wasn't I think it was in my mid-teens when that game came out. I remember having like a friend that had it, and we got both pretty obsessed. I mean, it was nice to have a little RPG. RPGs were always some of the funner games back then because they were different than action kind of platformer things that you're used to. You get like these little pocket stories, basically.
I remember there was a handheld system that came out. I think it was called the Lynx. And it was shortly after the Game Boy. And I never had it myself, but upon retrospect, it was like, I'm surprised that thing didn't was it Atari? I think it was Atari. This is going to be really random. I'm trying to remember something that I obviously don't remember very well. But anyway, I think it was the Atari Lynx. And it actually was a 16-bit handheld.
If you say it with a lot of authority.
It was the Atari Lynx. Anyways, I'm not. I think it's the Atari Lynx. But anyways, it was like a 16-bit handheld. But that came out when the Game Boy came out. And for perspective, the Game Boy was like half a bit.
Yeah. Nintendo's had a long mirrored history, and I kind of want to do an episode of that someday. We'll have to go back to the topic of just handheld in general. Yeah. But Nintendo's had a history of being the most underpowered, but yet still making the software everybody wants.
Yeah,
that's kind of their MO at this point, and. They've done it almost every. Remember the PS Vita? That disappeared. Even though it was one of my favorite systems.
And essentially it was an early Switch for all constructive purposes.
In a lot of ways. It was next gen. When it came out, it was totally underplayed. It was criminally underplayed because it was basically PS3 caliber.
Yeah.
Or
PS4, I think it was.
High-end PS2, PS3 caliber graphic-wise. When the PS4 was out, it was complementing PS4, but you could actually legitimately remote play your PS4 off of it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Which was really cool. And so I thought that was a system that was criminally underappreciated in my opinion. And it's all because the DS was just Nintendo just owns handheld. If there's hands held, hands down, Nintendo is the champ.
It's funny because by the time when the PS Vita came out and crashed, I thought for sure the handheld system was dead.
Yeah. And to be fair, when we were talking about the retrospective on last gen, when we were saying Nintendo was nowhere to be found, they were actually to be found. I'm going to retcon that a little bit. They were owning the handheld market. They were
3DS and stuff.
3DS. They were not hurting for money. I don't hope we never put that out there or made it seem like they were doing, they had nowhere to go. They failed the console market for sure, but they owned the handheld.
Yeah.
By far.
So when you were a kid, was it only the fighting games that you had parties? Because I remember I had parties for Who Framed Roger Rabbit on the NES.
Mario parties were big for me.
I used to like Mario Kart, yeah.
Mario Kart, Mario Party, all Mario Kart, and F-Zero actually. F-Zero was a big fan.
Oh,
One of my cousins, because
That game was
like
awesome.
when my family, my parents were, my dad was in the military, so we moved around a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't really move around that much, but we moved around a few times, and one of the big times was from like a pretty major city to a smaller town area where it was mostly around family.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of friends that were like cousins and stuff hanging out in my early teen years, and but even when like we'd go visit them when I was younger, and I remember video games were always a very central theme amongst us. Like I'd go see a bunch of games they had, and then be like, "Oh, cool," and then they, vice versa, bring games or whatever. They'd see what I have, and then I always got like, so one of the earliest co-op experiences of my life, and it's funny, I stay true and very loyal to these brands to this day. Secret of Mana.
Mm.
I have been eyeing the Secret of Mana collection on the Switch. Why? Would I ever play it again? Probably not, but I almost want to buy it out of pure nostalgia purpose of it. But I did buy Trials of Mana to play eventually. I haven't done it yet because I never played that one, so they made the recreation. It's a good game. But like that's my earliest memory. I remember going over to my cousin's house, and we had this cool RPG. For the first time, RPG had a multiplayer component because like you played one character, and it was like kind of an action RPG, so you control the monsters come and you fight them. But then it was like almost like a RPG beat 'em up.
Oh wait, I never played
You could control a second character in the game, and you go around beating the little characters up, and it was very much an RPG in the sense like your sword slashing the numbers. They had basically numbers until their health died, and it was awesome fun because like you're co-oping it. It was the first co-op RPG and experience of like it in my life, and that was a really big memory for me because it kind of instilled the fun of co-op games in general. Like
I've always liked co-op.
Oh, me too. Like how many times? Like even the last few episodes we talked about games that got us by, like as friends, even like distance wise, and so that was really big. Because when I'd go down and visit my friend and he played Zelda or whatever, I'd watch, right?
Yeah.
I'd liked it. Don't get me wrong. I liked watching because it was fun to watch a video game being played. But like this was different because I could go in, there was a story we could tackle together, and that was really cool. Actually,
it's one thing I find funny we didn't mention in the multiplayer episode, but I will kind of go back to it a little bit. One of the things I thought was interesting is when I sit back and think about like multiplayer in early games, some of them are kind of hilariously like not really multiplayer. Like I remember like the original Mario Brothers 1, like the Super Mario Brothers on the Nintendo, had a multiplayer, but what it was is if you played as Mario, you take a turn, I take a turn, I play as Mario. If Mario dies, he reskins into Luigi, and then you play.
That mechanic oddly worked out because it was always like, because of the way the game worked, it was like you'd watch your friend go as long as he could before he died, then you laugh, it's my turn, and then you go and you die, and they'd laugh at you, and it was sort of this camaraderie, I get farther than you thing, and it sort of worked. But yeah, I know what you mean. It was very much a trick.
Yeah,
it wasn't co-op. It was just, it wasn't even multiplayer. It was just, they implemented a way to kind of like swap.
Yeah. Like
they didn't have that built in like Mega Man or anything. Like I remember I co-opted Mega Man. I think it was Mega Man 2 with my cousin. Because we all ended up having Nintendos, me and my like whole family almost, especially where we ended up moving. My cousin Bill, he had Mega Man 2, and I remember we just stayed up all night one friggin'
You did the whole pass the control thing?
Just passed to try to beat it as much as we could, or beat as many. And those games were freaking hard. Like I redid it as an adult, and if there wasn't a rewind feature in the new games, I can't do them.
I just can't.
I wouldn't have got it.
I do remember that as a kid though. Like you kind of, even if the game didn't have a multiplayer, you kind of created your own. Where like you do like me and my sister did this a lot. Where like she'd be better at certain kinds of levels than I would be. And so if you knew you were dying and you knew if they were better at that level, you'd be like, here, you do this level. Mm-hmm. And then they'd go and do this level, and then it would be the same thing the other way around, where they might not be that good at this kind of level, but you were. It'd be like, here, you do it. And you just pass it around till you eventually beat the game. Yeah. I remember actually the first game I beat wasn't actually the first Mario. I to this day, I've never actually beaten the first Mario.
Really?
I know. Yeah, no, I haven't. And this might kind of make me lose all of my street cred as a video game player.
They're all one cred.
Yeah, the one cred, my one.
It's gone.
You go. Yeah,
it's gone. Person left. Let's stop watching.
Come back.
I'll beat it for you live.
But the first game I did beat was Super Mario Brothers 3. I do remember beating Super Mario Brothers 2, but I remember specifically beating Super Mario Brothers 3 with me and my sister when the game first came out. We literally stayed up all night just passing the controller back and forth until we beat the dang thing. And I remember that was a long game. Like
that game is super long. Super Mario World was long too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember beating those games. I remember beating Mario 2 with cousin again. Oddly enough,
I remember I beat Mario 2, but I beat it with a Game Genie. So I don't know if that counts. I just cheated my way right to the end.
Last boss. Play the last boss for me, game. I beat it.
Pretty much, yeah.
Imagine if you had that like Dark Souls Game Genie right now. You're just like, play Dark Souls for me, Game Genie.
In fairness, the Game Genie was glitchy as hell.
I forgot how it worked. Didn't you have to put the game?
Yeah. So the way it works is that you put the Nintendo cartridge in the Game Genie, and then there's this Game Genie / Nintendo cartridge melded into one thing that you shoved into the
It's like
Nintendo.
a piece of software in a box that it was a weird concept.
It like hacked your cartridge essentially.
But it was like the golden ticket, I remember back, because it was some really
infinite
hard
lives
games. And so like I remember friends that had one, you were like, oh, he must be the best. I don't know why, because like you know how like they had it and it was like kind of hard to get at that time. I remember them not being that easy to acquire.
I had an easy time getting them. I had a hard time getting one that worked because they would always just glitch out and like they would like it would actually physically change the way the cartridge fit into the Nintendo, so the Nintendo would kind of like warp everything, and it was kind of
yeah they were kind of clunky.
Because they weren't really licensed. It wasn't like something Nintendo made. It was like something a third party like dude is like hacking cartridges, and he's like, if I slap this thing on here and duct tape this around, shove it into the system, then it gives me infinite lives. And it's like, and we've come a long way because now like
then you get to play Mario and backwards. You save Bowser from
the negative world, which is
crazy stuff. No, I forgot about the Game Genie. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, I do remember that. I remember
Nintendo Power Club or whatever it was.
Was that the magazine?
Yeah, you used to be able to like, call up and get tips.
Oh no, I never did the call-in thing. I heard about it though. Where you call in, there'd be like video game coaches. They'd be like, "You just gotta believe in yourself, man." whatever they did.
You could be the next wizard.
The Wizard, California.
It's it was interesting. The days of they're really milking whatever they could from that whole generation of game session. Like, and people were obsessed with like a lot of games. Like, you think, we just talked about like asteroids and all Pong and all that stuff as if it was like nothing, because to us maybe it wasn't, but like there were people that took that shit seriously. Like they went to like contests and like there are people that are like asteroid masters and fucking like Space Invader masters.
I used to love Space Invaders. That game was fun.
Well, there are people that mastered it. And they
spend more time with it than I ever will.
Yeah, but it's interesting to think like people took those types of games like as esports series as people take.
I think there was always that avenue of like competitive, like even in the original Donkey Kong, there was like that guy from the King of Kong documentary that was like the long hair.
When you want your name written into history, you have to pay the price.
Oh yeah.
What was I going to say? I totally lost my train of thought. It's just gone. My train's... I got nothing.
So yeah, what other game memories you got?
I do remember, so there was the Game Genie, which hacked the game.
Do you have any Power Glove?
I did not have the Power Glove. I did have a friend that had the Power Glove.
I did.
And I remember thinking it was the coolest thing ever until I seen it actually playing, and you're like, this thing sucks.
Why am I just wearing a controller? Was the first impression I have. The only thing you could do that was kind of cool is at one point you could like in a car game you could like do this and like control the car a little bit, but it wasn't like very 1-to-1. It was like, and the car's like, and it's like.
It never felt cool as it
Because
looked.
the funny thing about the Power Glove is it's this peripheral device
Show
for the
it.
controller. I'm going to show it, yeah.
Put it on my hand right now
No.
through the magic of whatever you do.
There will be a clunky, barely makes any sense club there. But hey, the funny thing is, you sit there and think about it, the Nintendo controller had 6 buttons in total. And that's including the 4 directions. So it
was
had the
just a
4
controller,
directions
wasn't
and 2 buttons.
Yeah.
And then it had a start and a select button. So it didn't need this big fancy peripheral that would like virtually because I think what people were thinking it would be like in the movies, where hackers are like hacking code on the screen with their fingers or whatever.
Yeah, like in Minority Report. Where
Yeah, it was like pew, 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 pew. But it was really just like left, right, A,
you
B.
do this once and you're like, screw it. And you start playing it like a controller on your arm.
Yeah,
Like a
exactly.
controller, taped it on your arm. That's what exactly. My disappointment for that was probably one of the greatest disappointments of my early gaming life, because Nintendo had a great way of like tapping into your imagination, and eventually they get better at getting your imagination to reality. But like this was like, I was like, oh my god, it's virtual reality
Yeah.
for one of my limbs.
Yeah.
My limb is in the video game.
Yeah.
And then you get it and you're like, I just have a controller taped to my arm.
Yeah.
It's awkward. And yeah, it's terrible. Like,
I remember that I actually owned for like a week, and then it started to like give me headaches. So my parents were like, "I don't think you should have this anymore."
What were you doing? Spinning it around?
No, not the Power Glove. It was
Oh,
a
like-
transition to another thing.
I just pictured you like,
No, I was gonna say is
everything doesn't work.
I do remember for some reason we're talking about like Nintendo's crazy ideas.
Okay.
I remember I had for like I think it was like a week, and I don't remember if my parents thought I was going to puke and so they sold it or what. But I never ended up keeping it forever. Or maybe it was no, that's what it was. I rented it because that was the time when you could rent consoles.
Styles of time.
No, you could go to Blockbuster and rent like a
System.
yeah. And I rented the Virtual Boy. And I actually kind of liked it, but it was a silly idea. So it was basically this screen they just slapped to your face, and it was like only 2 colors. It was like just red and black. And it was different shades of red to kind of like give depth. But it was at the end of the day, it was red and black. So it was like one step up from the Game Boy that you slapped to your face, and then you played like a virtual. And it came in this little stand that was super awkward because like what table is like face height, right? So you had to like scoot down and like play this game that's strapped to your face.
If I remember correctly, I did want one at a certain point, and like you, I don't think I rented it, but I asked people. Like I think I went to like one of the Jumbo videos or whatever the hell existed, and I was like, "Oh, what's that like?" And the dude was like,
It's terrible.
It sucks." Something like that. He like totally dropped the worst review of anything. Like he had like talked. Like I was like, "Okay, I guess I don't want that." Good job on the upsell, buddy. Good job.
Yeah.
I'm a kid. You could have told me anything. I would have rented it for like.
It puts you in a virtual world.
He's like, he was just completely. You could tell that he was let down personally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting.
I think it gave me a headache and maybe like
Trying to think of other weird peripherals. The Nintendo gun was a cool peripheral.
I did like the Zapper, yeah.
The Zapper was cool. Like Duck Hunt back in the day.
That was actually
a
kind
neat
of,
idea.
when you sit down and think about it, that was pretty revolutionary considering it came out with the Nintendo, which is like their first console ever.
Yeah.
That it had like this light tracing gun.
Yeah, it was cool.
The only thing that made me disappointed about it is that you couldn't shoot the dog in Duck Hunt. That was laughing at you.
True.
Nintendo, you should have let me shoot the dog in the face when he laughed
I
at me.
mean, you're shooting ducks.
It's one
what's
step up.
one other thing.
But anyways.
Yeah, no. Peripherals.
But the funny thing is, though, I remember, like, when we talked about the Game Genie, one of the things that was a little bit more common back in the day was, like, people would, like, literally hack a system, make this peripheral that did something that the companies probably didn't approve of in the first place. But they were allowed to do it because there was no real rules back in the day.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing they used to do with arcade systems. Speaking of which, were you an arcade kid?
I was an arcade kid, but I don't remember the arcades very well. I remember them being very noisy, quarter-hungry places.
I remember my dad being super into the arcade, and he used to take me, and we just like he'd play like some crazy dad thing, like golf or whatever, maybe something crazy. I don't know, Dad.
I do.
Dad, leave a comment. But like he would go play something, and then he'd give me a bunch of quarters over. I'd go play random stuff.
I do remember like there was, I think it was like a Daytona racer or something, like where it was actually a car that you could climb into and race in.
Yes,
I
he liked a lot of the racer stuff. You'd always like, there'd be like the 2 racer thing, and, or whatever. And it was a fun time. Like I wouldn't say it was like a necessarily an arcade kid. Like I think I was like, as I was growing up, I was like a little bit of the too young to go by myself.
Yeah.
And then by the time I was getting old enough to go by myself, it was just being phased out. So I did end up going a few times by myself, just to have fun and play some games, waste quarters.
Actually,
but I was phasing out. Basically, the console was starting to take over.
It's a shame that we have a pandemic going on, because I do think like people would very much so welcome the return of the arcade. I think.
Well, in Japan, they never left. Apparently, like they still fighting game arcades. Maybe they do other things too, and they kind of come back in a weird nostalgic way in different areas. Like I know, like there are like they're kind of considered retro arcades though. It's like a retro bar. You might go to a bar and there'd be like actual arcade games, and it's sort of like appealing to.
Yeah, actually, one of my
our generation, I guess.
One of the coworkers in my last job, I suppose he was my coworker too, but one of the main guys, his brother was a maintenance worker there. And he actually like collects arcade cabinets, and I think he actually has the Daytona Racer cabinet.
Nice.
Maybe he doesn't. I'm not sure.
Maybe just make them.
Maybe just making shit up.
He's got everything. Yeah,
but I do know he has quite a few of them. Jordy and Warren, you know who you are. You should. They're
superstars. They got everything.
They got
Wives.
They got the Virtual Boy,
every arcade
and
game,
and the Power Glove, and I do know they had that he collects the arcade cabinets. I can't remember which ones he has, but if you're watching,
drop a comment. Tell everybody which ones you have.
Tell us what consoles you got or arcade cabinets. There we go. Squirrel.
Nah.
But yeah, like I don't really remember the arcade. I do remember there was like one arcade game I used to really love. It's like called like McGee's Shootout or something, and it was like this big bowl that had like a hologram in the middle, and it had like guns.
Oh yeah. I kind of remember. I remember like there'd be shooter, but like I don't have any like standout memories. I played a lot of. Actually, that's a lie. I do have some standout memories about fighting games. I did play Street Fighters and Tekken games there quite a bit actually, but like in terms of the shooting things, I don't remember. There was like a Terminator ones and different like sort of IP ones that sort of come out over time, but yeah, I don't have any like crazy memories because, like I said, I was really young. My dad would take me, and we'd hang out for as long as they were like. We'd all go to the mall, and Dad and I would end up at the arcade at some point.
I do remember though the arcades really. When I sit down and think about it, they really emphasized immersion in a lot of physical ways. Like I remember there was like I said the car cabinet. I do remember there was a lot of games that like would have like saddles that you could sit on if there was a horse game or whatever. Like they had a lot of physicality behind them. There's even some really weird obscure Asian ones I've seen where there's like this might get us demonetized, I don't know. But there's a weird Asian game that I've seen where it's like a dude's butt that you got to poke.
I don't know if you're going to ask where he went.
I was farting around the internet when I seen.
It's sure you're not repressing a memory here. This is not this. This is being about arcades.
This is and just into weird, creepy memories.
I never even played the game myself because I was.
Is it okay?
I am going to put a picture of that game here to prove that I did not make that up.
Deep repressed. I feel like
I did not make it up, man. It's thick.
Is it real? Like what?
I don't know what the logic
was there
of it
a creepy guy who was like, "Here, little kid, come back." Like what?
I don't know what the game is about. I just know there's a cabinet. It's a butt that you poke.
I don't know what to say to any of that.
Anyway, the point being that arcade cabinets had a lot of physicality around the poking in the butt.
I can, for one, say I've never had that experience going into an arcade.
No, but you played the get into the car one and the
yeah, I did play that.
Or the one where you put boxing gloves on the box, or
I don't know if I played that one. I do remember one. It was kind of weird though. It was like It was like Punch Out, but it was like whatever the arcade version of it was, where it's like you see the little legs, and it was clearly where Punch Out got its inspiration, or vice versa. I don't know which one came first, but
there's one game a buddy of mine told me about. I never played it myself. Maybe you played it, but it was a boxing game on the original Atari, and he calls it the threes because he's apparently like picture like each of my arms and then my body, and it was just like this three shape. And they would just swing the three.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember there was another one too. It was a hockey game. I think it was early NES game called Wayne Gretzky Hockey. And all it was this plane of ice, and then like a little dot with like the leg that came out, and it was just like you move this weird thing this way. It's like supposed to be the stick out of the body. This would be like the character, and that would be the stick, and you control it. Like it was the worst.
That sounds terrible. Actually,
the best hockey game though was the one. Remember we played the fat dude, the skinny dude, and the little dude, and it was a very cartoony game, and like the big guy he could like check you, and the little guy was super fast. And
weird. I don't know that game.
Oh shit! What was the name of that? I think it was just called Ice Hockey, but it was a fantastic game.
I do know there was a Nintendo game called Ice Hockey.
Yeah, and it was that game. That was actually a really, really fun game. Played that a lot with like friends too back in the day. Actually, it was known. It was funny. So where I grew up, hockey was like super popular because it was big in the country when I was like in early high school.
Plus we're Canadians.
Plus we're Canadians, so we got to Canucker hockey. Canuck. Anyways, it was kind of not an inside joke. It was just a thing that happened. So I'd go to school and like half of my class would be hockey players, and I didn't play hockey because I couldn't skate. But I played. I was pretty good at sports. Like I was decent at like floor hockey and stuff. And other sports, but I couldn't play ice hockey. But I knew like every player, and I knew all their numbers, and it was because of video games. Like I used to play like the NHL, whatever. And I remember one time there was a guy, he would like quiz me. He'd be like, blah blah blah, like list off a number, and he'd be like, who plays this for this team? And I'd be like, boom, this guy. And then he'd be like, and it was mildly humorous to him because like. I didn't play hockey, so other than I did like hockey though. Like I watched a lot and I was a fan and followed it. Anyways, but like I knew every number because of the hockey game. Like every year I got like the NHL 93, 94, whatever, and so I always knew what the rosters were. Anyways, that's a kind of a fun little. Those games were awesome back in the day too, like the NHL, blah blah blah. I haven't kept up with that. I know, like, my brother-in-law loves them.
They pretty much come out
like
one every year, pretty much.
Yeah, they do, and like they do actually. Like, I don't know if every year is an iteration worth buying, but they do actually get incrementally quite a bit better. Like, I played one a couple of years back. I just bought one to buy one and to try it, and it was good. It was like I was amazed by how much like stick control you have. It's like you can put it between your legs, and
I bought one for the PS4, and the only thing I could figure out how to do was to check people. So I was just running around checking people through the game. Yeah.
Oh, Tony Hawk was another sport game.
Oh, I remember Tony Hawk. Yeah.
Because many of my friends a lot of us were skateboarders or aspiring. We were actually really terrible at skateboarding, almost all of us, but we were willing to do this stupid shit to try to get better. So I remember like there was this hill, no word of a lie. It was like it's a freaking gigantic hill. And it was like just a water tower hill. And so it was like, it's just a straight down. And none of us had any skills, keep in mind. Like we couldn't even do a kickflip. We were just, our only claim to fame was that we would go do the stupidest thing imaginable, like go down the longest hill, the most sharpest hill, and try to stay on as long as possible. And it resulted in a lot of pain. I remember the last time I did it, I went flying off and into a ditch, and I was all scratched up.
I never had I never really tried to mimic the.
This was actually before
Tony Hawk,
but it's just me being stupid as a young kid.
Yeah, I think I do remember the Jet Moto games. Those were fun, where you actually like had like a Sea-Doo that you would just jet through.
It was fun. Actually, there was a game for I want to say, which one was it? Was it GameCube that came out? It was an awesome Skidoo game. I remember it was like Wave Racer or something. That was amazing. It might have been Wii. One of them was Nintendo.
There was a Wave Racer on the N64 where he was like a C.
Maybe it was that one. There was one game when CD was Nintendo. It was a freaking awesome game. There's also, do you remember a game? It was like
kind of an off-road race thing. It was like a track, and like it was like 2D in the sense that you watched it and you can kind of control the vehicle on the track. You know what I mean?
This is like RC Pro-Am, maybe?
It might have been. I can't remember the game's name, but I remember
it was like a top-down
it. It was
perspective.
top-down, like definitely from one angle. And, you know, you kind of control the vehicle in the sense that it would travel, like you could turn and stuff, and you had to go around the track, and you were
Was there like
racing
ice oil slicks that you could slip on?
I think so.
Yeah, that sounds like RC Pro.
That was a fun game, and me and my friends used to play that a lot too.
You had little rocket launchers that you could get as a power up, and you could shoot your other dudes. And...
Yeah. Me and my other cousin Andrew used to play Worms a lot. We
I loved
played the
Worms.
crap ton of Worms. Like that was kind of like right at the cusp of like, this was before the internet was the internet, and you had to like literally just call each other on the modems. And,
Yeah.
And anyways, that's what we used to do. We used to like clear. You know, parents can't go near the phone. You know, you make sure that you had that power or whatever you needed, and then you just, I'm going to call you. Make sure your mom doesn't pick up, and then we just do that thing and then play Worms.
For the youngins that don't know, and back in the internet days, the early days of dial-up, if somebody picked up the phone while you were on dial because it was going through the phone, it would knock you off the internet and it would scream in their ear, and nobody.
The internet didn't go through their head and keep it going. It
Yeah.
just killed it.
It just died.
The internet didn't exist all around you.
Yeah, so it made everyone in the household angry when that happened.
Yeah, because your parents weren't happy.
Because they got screamed at through the ear.
by a machine.
Yeah.
And we weren't happy because
We got kicked out of our game or whatever we did. Yeah, I do remember Worms. I remember liking that a lot. Trying to remember some of the other games I used to play.
Because Worms was always hilarious.
Oh, it was.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
It's such a simple formula, but it's still good. I'll play Worms every now and again. Now I'll buy it. Like, I think I bought it for a phone one time. I don't know if I still have it.
I think I bought it for every platform I've ever had. And I don't really like play it a whole lot, but I always end up buying it.
I like to go back to it every now and again. Just like a random game.
Yeah, I think Worms is my longest term love, unless you count Mario. I remember Dr. Tetris. I remember remember for some reason my aunt fell in love with Dr. Tetris when I got it. And she
Dr. Mario, I mean.
What did I say?
Dr. Tetris.
Yeah.
I don't know what Dr. Tetris looks like.
It's a butt-looking game. It's called Dr. Tetris.
God. Not going there again. We tapped into some dark, repressive memory. Scary shit and stuff.
It's not. I never played the game. I just
It might not even be a game. Might be a
It is
repressed
a game.
memory.
No, it's not. It's not a repressed memory. It's a game.
Oh, we're doing this scary.
But anyways, yeah, Dr. Mario. Sorry.
Throw him into the ward.
I remember my aunt fell in love with that game and kind of stole it from us, and basically.
Dr. Mario, yeah. Actually, my wife's family was big into Dr. Mario. Like even as when she was growing up as a kid, like her mom and her dad would have like big tournaments, and her mom was a freaking phenom at the game, which was crazy good. And like my wife actually is kind of funny. She's like she games, but not outside of the 2D sphere. If it goes into 3D, her brain's just like I don't understand. But like her brain gets 2D, and so like she sort of keeps on her tradition of gaming, which is like playing Dr. Mario. Like we kind of keep the tradition of her what she had growing up, because her mom and dad loved it, and it passed it on to the family. Like they used to have, like I remember actually when her mom was still alive, we used to go over and we'd challenge each other for just the shot to play her mom, and her mom would be like kick all our asses like easily. She'd like be playing one arm behind her back or something, like, looking conversation, like smack talking to us while we're playing, and we're trying our hardest, and we're like oh, and she's just like, and it was really funny actually, and she was a really good sport about it. I mean, she smack talked like the best of us. Like, she should have played fighting games. I could have used her on my side.
Well, there was I never played the games, but I know there was like a Street Fighter Tetris clone where it was like Puzzle Fighter or something.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah, there is. I think it's called Puzzle Fighter.
I found like weird. Like I had like bought Puyo Puyo Tetris when it came out, which is a bizarre name. Actually, me and my wife would like have made up a bunch of insults towards each other as a joke based on we're based on that game. Like it was kind of funny. But yeah, talk about a weird matchup, because Puyo Puyo doesn't really work like Tetris. It's kind of,
isn't that where it's like teardroppy kind of looking thing?
Yeah, and then they mix the two, and so like basically I just ended up just playing Tetris, and I might be my brain just doesn't want to learn something new. But
I do remember there was, I can't remember which one it was, but there was a Mortal Kombat game, and for a while the Mortal Kombat series was notorious for like throwing in every kind of MIDI game possible. Like there was like Mortal Kombat kart racing where you could like zap the other player with Raiden's electricity and shoot the scorpions, like get over here at the other car. And there was actually a Mortal Kombat Tetris thing where
Oh my god, do you remember Twisted Fate? Sorry.
yes, the car one.
That game? I loved that game. I had so many good memories. I don't know what friends I played that with.
Twisted Metal, right?
Twisted Metal, sorry,
Yes.
that's what it was. Twisted Metal was like a card game, but like the idea was like,
You shoot each other.
yeah, it was almost like a shooter.
It's almost like a battle royale because I
Yes,
think it was a like
that's
last man
exactly what it
standing
was.
kind of thing. Yeah.
And you could only play it with like your friends or whatever. And I loved that game. Loved that game. Like the first 3 iterations I bought into completely. All of my friends, we always got it because it was always a blast. And I don't know whatever happened to it. It just
They
disappeared.
had I think they had the last game on the PS3. They had like a newer, updated version of it that didn't really do that well, and I don't think they've really ever.
Never went back. Maybe they had their heyday with it.
I really don't want to play that game.
It was a fun game. Like back in the day, that game was the game. Like I can remember my friends sitting down and played that game, laughing our ass
Yeah.
off the entire time.
You could like. I remember there was one character that you could catapult people at the other car, and there's the clown with a fire head that would go around an ice cream truck shooting things.
And it was hard to be like so good at that game that like
It was competitive, but it was
You know what I mean?
clunky too.
Yeah. So like no one friend could. It was more hilarious than it was frustrating because like everybody got a shot because it was actually relatively hard.
I
It's, like,
remember
really-
being hard.
At least hard to master. At least I found anyways. And so like all my friends, we would trade barbs and shooting each other, and winning and losing, and like nobody ever. It was always a good time. I really enjoyed that game actually.
Yeah.
I never think to mention it. Except it just popped in. I was like, I got to talk about this because
Yeah, well,
that game.
that's the whole point of this episode is all about the memories, right? But yeah.
Yeah, so that's all I got. Like, I can't think. Like, I have more memories, but we could just go on forever.
Yeah.
So we'll have to have a part 2 to this discussion at some point. There'll always be memories to talk about. I've gamed since I was a wee child, as did you. So the things that came up forward, especially some weird game about poking. Anyway. Anyway, there, yeah. No memory will top that memory. Of course. Anyway, we'll have more memories.
Yeah. So if you remember an obscure game from your childhood that you want to know if we remember or not, leave us a comment.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know. Like if you have like a strange game, or maybe just doesn't have to be a strange game. It doesn't have to be like one of his. You can just have a normal game that you think we missed. Tell us about it. Drop us a comment. Drop us a like if you like this video. Drop us a subscribe if you like to subscribe to things like this.
But remember to click the little bell notification.
Why? Why would they do that?
Because it tells them whenever we make a new video.
That's true. That's what it does do. And on that note, folks, get the hell out of here and have some memories.
Bye.